anybody like to
Yeah, so
start?
enforcement first gets down to reporting, right? And
Yes.
so we now have a company, and I think everybody's heard the contract, right? So they officially signed the contract, and they will have an 800 number, and they have
An
a online
portal as well. That was kind of what.
okay, so they do have an online portal as well for people with complaints. So who's going to man that? Rich?
They have a staff that can.
That, like, part of the agreement is they will staff that with our, that's just, with our assistance.
So I'm just trying to think through a flow chart, I guess, on it. So
It will know better. I mean, like I said, we are just now having our meetings with them to coordinate how all this is going to look like for us. And I think we have
The meeting tomorrow.
a meeting tomorrow. We're establishing all where we go here, so. We'll know more exactly about it. So right now, conceptually, we have concepts.
So the decision tree goes down two paths, right? One where it's a health and safety issue. And the police are automatically pulled into those, correct?
They'll ask, yeah, so they'll ask, what's your complaint, and then if they deem that it's gonna be, they'll automatically either send them over or tell them, hang out. But they'll still log the complaints.
And that's where they are
then
involved.
If they don't fill it, it needs to go to the PD, then they'll ask the questions that we asked and send the complaint or call.
And then the other path is non-health and safety, those are the nuisance ones, right? Which would be, is noise in there?
Noise.
Trash.
Trash.
So call the 24-hour contact, that's who will be contacted first.
And then they will contact, so that's what I'm trying to get to, Audrey, is okay, when it says responsibility on enforcement, that's what I'm trying to exactly get to that. So they call the 24-hour contact line. They're going to contact the management company?
Yes.
Or
Or that may be.
whoever the 24-hour contact is on the registration form.
The idea that 24/7 should be the person to resolve the issue. That's the idea. Again, that will become something that we're gonna make sure the contractor keeps us informed as to whether that's working or not. Because not responding is a violation itself. So I mean, it defeats the whole purpose of having it, but we don't have anybody on the other end.
Right.
So, in an instance, so let's say for a self-managing person, they have their cleaning person on that, and so
If it's not, again, we can't dictate who they put on the end of that 24/7, but whoever they do, again, needs to be the one that solves the problem.
So let's say they have the person and they're unable to resolve it because they don't have the authority to, they don't know how to handle. What's the city's responsibility at that point? You guys ever reach out to that owner and say, hey, the person that you selected
Yes.
does not meet the criteria?
Well, so two issues, Tim, I mean, we understand our marching orders at this point from the city manager, if the issue is not resolved in 1 hour, then it's a violation.
Right.
And then the second issue, which isn't our goal, our goal is compliance.
Right.
So then the second issue is why wasn't it resolved, and that's what we need to find out. If we hope, and again, we're working with this compliance company. We'll need to flesh that out, why wasn't it resolved?
It's track of it or if it was not resolved, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so they sit there and they'll check back, and who do they check back with? Clean it?
Well, I believe what it was explained is, usually if it's not resolved, they're receiving another call.
That's what the problem.
So the they complain.
But again, we should be able to gather all that data, find out, but we have multiple issues with 1, 2, 3, Abbey Driven, calling, not having the issue resolved. But again, last we heard, our marching orders are kind of very little tolerance. If an hour the issue's not resolved, citation. like I said, that's. And then find out why, like, so, that, secondary, to that, why was it resolved, if the contact number issue. Again, citation, a good motivator, I guess, in a sense, that's our goal.
So let's say my company, we receive a phone call, we have a noisy group, I go over there, I'm there in 15 minutes, and I tell them, you guys need to, take it inside, need to be quiet, blah, 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 this is their warning, everything's good, I go home, we get another call. I'm back over there, if I'm responsive, I'm not gonna get a citation
That's two
because they
separate
didn't.
issues as far as I'm concerned. You know,
Okay.
like I said, we
As
get
long
it.
as we're being,
You're making,
we're doing what we need to do.
yeah,
Well, then we just continue down there.
well, that's all.
No, I mean, at that point, if I get called back a second
Second
time,
time I called.
you're
police.
gone. Yeah, you gotta go. And I tell them that, if I get called again, if I come back again, you have to.
Right, okay.
You guys have the most power,
Yeah.
that, much more so than our $200 citation, leaving a $400 a night rental, because it's in your contract, I assume. That behavior.
And it's sad,
expects you to leave.
it's sad to see kids having to pack up because their parents are
Sure,
acting
my
like
God.
fools, but that's still better.
But again, you gotta be very careful and mindful that most of these people are gonna be intoxicated. You wanna put them on the street, on Highway 361, head-on collision happens.
That's true.
I mean, I won't throw them out if I think they're intoxicated. I will try to let them know that I'll be back in the morning to see what's going on. We'll make a decision what's happening at that point. But liabilities, that's huge.
So are you ever going to do that, or is it just a PD function?
No, that's me. That's happened.
Yeah, okay.
Many
Without,
times.
without PD involved.
No involvement.
Right,
Yeah.
Right, that's what we said last time.
Yeah, but that's also comes into question places where there is multiple units involved. That gets very confusing. I mean, you go to a place like Commons and it's all circular and you walk out there, it's 3-4 different properties that are having a party together. And you're like, okay, this happened last year. They were line dancing and there was at least 4 groups. I couldn't tell how many. But I eventually just called PD and I got a call again from the guy that was mad that crossed the way that didn't vacation the same way these guys vacation. Maybe he was jealous he didn't get to play a part, but finally PD went out there, I think the second time, and they shut it down. But there's gonna be some of those gray areas.
We're gonna have to sort through some of these. We agree, we understand. And,
But a lot of learning, hopefully, that's one of the reasons we got this management, right? I mean, these people are supposed to be experts. This isn't their first rodeo.
well, but they keep in mind, they're experts with each community that they work with for that specific community and the uniqueness. Like I said, some issues with short-term rentals are in historically, in neighborhoods that historically had none. That's a whole different dynamic than areas where, like ours, where 90% has always allowed it, and now we're seeing it. So, like I said, they will become experts, like I said, based on what we direct them, or what the situation we see here.
Could I share some numbers with you real quick? I know you come up with, you talk about property management companies, and this is one of the things that really opened my eyes. And I mentioned this before, you go in the chamber, there's 17 management companies listed on that website. You go onto those websites and you count roughly 1,100 properties represented in 4A. And you'll look through the list and you'll see probably there's Vacasa wasn't there, but they don't represent a lot here at this point. But, that's 1,100. And then I go to VRBO and I can tell you there's got to be roughly 2,000 properties on VRBO. That's kind of the given number. If you use we count it based on nightly rate. So, because you only get 300 no matter what you do. So if you use the nightly rate, you can come up with some good numbers. So it stays very consistent around 2,000. And from our estimation, there's about 15% of that number that are on Airbnb that are not on Airbnb. And so I come up with a number roughly around 2,400 vacation rentals in Port Aransas That excludes Sandcastle and some of the others that are not up and running. I think that's a pretty close number. I know I saw in the paper that one of those companies, I don't know if it's GovOS, that thought there's 3,500. I don't know if that number is accurate. Again, I just quickly gathered this data, but what it really brings to light is there's 1,300 units that are managed by other than companies.
And that gets down to another important thing on the enforcement, which I was gonna bring up too, was we had talked previously about having some security that was managed by, I guess, the management companies, or I don't know how you discussed it, I wasn't at that meeting, so
Communities would be a good one.
so how do you do that, I guess, see that half the people aren't even participating, right?
So just for instance, in your neighborhood, Royal Sands and you can kind of lump Mustang, well, I don't know how well y'all work with them. I got your common board.
I keep them both in
Oh,
control.
Okay, good. So we manage around 16 properties out there. On average, they do around 60-something thousand, $63,000 in rental a year. Y'all have somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or so between the two of you out there, I think, in the rental. On one of the websites, one of the VRBOs or Airbnbs, and, roughly $3 million to $3.5 million worth of rental revenue goes through your two neighborhoods. My thought is, in an HOA like that, you could put in that resort fee of 2%. Doesn't affect hardly anything anybody does. It's not going to stop a renter from coming. I mean, Village Walk has the same, they have a $20 a night, but you could quickly come up with $62,000 for your two HOAs. Then you could throw in the Casa neighborhood next to you with Dorado Dunes and some of the others to be a part of that consortium or whatever you want to call it. And you'll have the funds. You only need somebody 150 nights a year. I
Is
can't.
that a city mandated fee? Is that the way you look at it?
No, I think it's an HOA association that they try to, and if we get more HOAs to solve their own problems, then we really just get down to just the city situations that are not in HOA.
What's your negative about just having the city take over that? Because then, and I'll tell you my thought.
Yep.
If we try to do it from an HOA perspective, you're gonna have to convince with our bylaws. Sure. It's gonna be, I think, more than 70% of the owners that have to agree with this. They'll have to agree with the resort fee. And then we'll have to collect it. Yep. And I don't know who's gonna collect it other than me. And I've got, I think, last count 4 jobs right now. So,
No,
okay,
I
so
see
then we'll
that.
collect it. It'll be difficult. And then you, I look at it from more of, hey, we've got a PD.
Yep.
I think we've got a nice model with the recent implementation of, for example, the beach code enforcement individual. We've got code enforcement here in Port Aransas. Can we simply expand those individuals or have some kind of PD that would do it rather?
But I mean, is that
have
then,
it collected citywide?
but then is that fair to
You put it
all
on
the citizens?
No, you're not gonna put it on the citizens. I think, it will be charged, like you said, it's a resort.
Well, like increasing the yearly 175 up to
Yeah.
whatever to cover the
And
cost.
increasing that.
So everybody that's renting a property is paying the same fee and it's all
So-
going.
And that's the only fair way I see to do it, because otherwise you're gonna have security, some people are going to get quote unquote free security, I guess, right? And then people, they're gonna be riding on the coattails of Silver Sands or Lake Paradise.
What about, and I talked to Nicole about this because I don't know what the city charters allow you to do, but I know that HOT tax money is really earmarked for certain given things. We can't do much with it. And your hands are tied. But I know that the city of Port Aransas was looking possibly to raise to the 9% tax code or tax that HOT tax that is used in Galveston, Padre, and a lot of other places in Texas. But we're not able to really spend the money we have now. So I don't think that's a wise move there, but I do like the adding to the registration. Or if the city could pass a requirement that there was a 2% island fee. I don't care what you call it, but it puts together amount of money that doesn't go to our general fund. It's used to be use to hire people to patrol the city, to enforce what's going on.
So
And-
Rick,
and
you
create a
probably have the
presence.
most expertise in this, or Nicole, I mean,
Well,
how could we do that? Could we simply increase the rental registration fee and use those funds specifically to hire police officers? Or enforcement?
Yeah,
That's what I said.
Definitely start there.
Yes, it took Well, that was with hot funds though, right? Hot
Yeah,
tap
but
funds.
I think we're gonna have a problem using it for
I
that.
don't think you can.
I think that is what we would call our
Is
bad. He said.
It's just general, it's still money that comes out of the general fund, just a budget item. You know, so it's,
But then
no matter what you
into
call
the
it.
general fund, and the police, so that balance out is the point, right?
Yeah, it's just not how I, that's the simplistic way to look at it. Found government that look at it that way. They don't look at the revenue offset by whatever source of its citation.
but the non-renting taxpaying citizens of Port Aransas shouldn't be subject to paying for the rental part of the program. I guess that's what we're saying, and I agree with that.
So, but here's
They
what
could
I'll
also
out there.
get benefit
So
of having more
On any
police.
given night, I know we're talking about renters, but on any given night, do we not have
Yes.
Yes.
sure locals that have wild or better parties than some of our tourists? And so is the idea somebody providing a calming reminder to these groups, no matter who they are? You know, that's a difficulty. I know that we're focused on the short-term rental because there is an explosive growth, and that's a change that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. But we also have a local community. You know, it's been known to, have a few people over at poker parties and cars. And so I think the answer is that we want that civic responsibility and hey, we're just talking more police officers. We spent all day today,
That's pretty much where I'm.
interviewing the code enforcement officers, and I can tell you, we posed them.
I guess the funding could be offset, I mean, so if we break up the two things, we say, hey, we'll increase the fees, and then we'll also hire more police officers. So we don't connect the two, but.
But I can tell you in all of our interviews today, there's just education. Police, it's just not an after-hours job for these civilian code people. So we're back to great if we had somebody say, oh, yeah, I only want to work at night, I want to butt heads for loud drunk people.
As code officers,
We have to use a stick and that's to keep a dog away.
So I think no matter what, we come back full circle to the issues that we have after hours. It almost invariably could result in confrontation, just has to be from a trained law enforcement officer that has the bigger stick, which is literally the stick.
And that should be in the
Or-
policy,
or-
and they
or-
should recognize who
or
they're
handcuffs.
calling, the police or code enforcement. Right?
Not a gray area.
There is, but I mean,
There was someone behind you, and I know you don't have eyes in the back of your
I'm so
head.
sorry.
Somebody did raise their hand. They wanted to
I'd
comment.
love to work after hours in Boston.
I did have some,
position is still posted.
I did have some numbers also, I found out how many houses are pretty much on here. So there's 6,405 taxable buildings, 507 are commercial, and there's some apartment complexes of buildings in there, like 4 of them maybe, might be 4 places or something. I haven't looked those up, and there's 918 homesteads. And there's 4,955 residential non-homesteads. So, you have your second
Yeah, second
homeowners, and, some people rent long-term, find that's gonna be a bit much, but
The numbers lie, there's something that
Yeah.
Then like I said, once we start getting
Yeah.
data on it, we'll know.
It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, it is.
If they're not on VRBO and Airbnb, they're not renting very much. They're not renting very well, because that's where we get all of our
But I would
bookings.
say, I mean, if we don't get folks at night, then it's a fool's errand, okay? That's when our problems occur, okay? Friday and Saturday night. Now, I appreciate people would rather work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, but reality is, just like our EMS, and just like fire departments throw, or my wife who's an RN, right? Yeah, it'd be nice for her not to, go in at night, but she works nights and that's her job, and, she has to take care of people. And we just don't tell people, oh, well, now they do give them a 15%,
I've seen people
increase,
here,
right?
right,
So-
hospitality.
I mean, there have to be people that will do it. I mean, it depends on the dollars
Hey.
to attract them.
So can you contract it out, or is that like sort of a, can you contract with private sector to do that portion of it?
I mean, I think that's a better question, but historically, we hired
Yeah, I mean, you wanted to
personnel.
if you had a way to also contract with a company that provides security.
And
Some
again,
discussion
here's the
about
thing,
police officers.
it comes back to, at the end of the day, what is that person gonna do when they get resistant?
Yeah.
Screw you, I'm not gonna quiet down and I'm not gonna turn.
And they're
and
gonna
I'm
call
gonna
the
keep
police.
it.
As a code
Then you're still
enforcement
gonna
officer,
call.
More police.
as a code enforcement officer, all we're allowed to use is a stick. That's all we're allowed to carry on our body, and that's to keep a dog away. And they just passed that before we even carry anything.
So other revenue sources, though, I mean, you could restrict those to, through an ordinance to go toward those issues that Dave was talking about, right? So say you raise food and beverage tax or whatever it's called, do not have an ordinance that restricted that 1%.
It's tricky. State of Texas passed legislation that specifically prohibits impact fees other than a very narrow group, all of which we do subscribe to: drainage, parks, and roadway use. Other than that, anything that could be construed as an impact fee is illegal.
Or not from the right, yeah.
So it's those fine lines we have to navigate.
Okay, just.
Yeah.
I'm
And again, it's a personnel issue, and like I said, I know what you're saying. Yeah, somebody,
I understand
should
what
have
you're
that, but nobody yet that we've interviewed wants to, nor would I blame them. Some with law enforcement backgrounds or jail backgrounds, that's not what their expectation is. So again, it comes back to that, at the end of the day, I just don't see how we avoid the reality that the police issue after hours when there's late night confrontation, be it parking, drinking, noise, lights. It almost invariably becomes something confrontational that.
So the
Civilian
civilian it's a police issue. Bottom line.
I don't see that the security ends up helping, because that's no different than a code person that, if you're willing, it still doesn't have arrest authority, or the ability to pursue the reality of what they have. Most of the time, they
think a
keep
lot of
compliance.
people would be quiet. How can I say this? I mean, like Steve, you go out and you talk to folks, and in most cases, you probably be compliant, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a badge, you don't have a gun, maybe you do, but,
Have you got the ability to throw that?
So
he
now,
does have that, but code enforcement, still have to have some sense of, hey, this person has authority, right? It's an authority figure.
we have pretty shirts that
Yeah.
have cool looking.
So, I mean, you could do that, if we get down to it, we do police, but I mean, I think just to move on, then Audrey, maybe enforcement's gonna be the police. So what I'm hearing, I don't wanna say, put words on people's mouth, it's that the private security firms hired by the management companies, it's not, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have an issue. I mean, we have issues. We have people that silver sands. We have people, we get called, the police get called. But I mean, we're first line of defense. So we go, and then if we need backup, we call the police. But I don't really
I'm sure really
have
hard not to
issues
call them.
because they're gonna listen to us. We have the authority to throw them out. And I know what you said about the drinking, but if they're drinking, they don't want to get thrown out either. So, I mean, I think there needs to be, everyone needs to have a 24-hour emergency phone number. We do. We have a cell phone number. I think those numbers need to go to you guys, so you have all of them, so you know who to contact after hours, but
I don't know if you go by yourself, but we'll go in twos as well. Like if I have to go, I'll take one of my maintenance guys with me and off we go. Our police department is already stretched.
I have a
Twos
question
in,
about that.
they don't, we can rectify a situation for them at nighttime. They have real crime.
So what is involved in, like, during spring break, you see state troopers, you see everybody coming from all around to be here during spring break. What is involved in that, and why can't we have that also during?
That's that wonderful mutual aid, friendship, relationship that we have with all those law enforcement officers. They also write most of their annual ticket quotas in that one week that they're here.
So
You'd
it's-
like to come, so it's just a request for support for that isolated period of time.
I feel like they
Now, we
like
have in
it,
the
they
past-
want it.
We haven't
They
in
can
the past
only
paid
come
some.
here for stuff like that, though. They can't come here just for
a whole season.
a whole
So-
season.
We have
Just to give
paid,
us a
we
big
have
one.
paid
July 4th.
Our state troopers are at the
law
border.
enforcement officers to help manage traffic and have experience with high volume, like in San Antonio and events. But that hasn't even happened.
So
the
we
last
looked at
5
doing that instead, I mean, rather than hiring full-time police officers, look for individuals for like on overtime basis.
Law enforcement issue.
Sure.
It's a budgetary issue. You know, you just simply, but my takeaway at the end of the day, any evening enforcement, if the city's gonna do it, it's gotta be law enforcement.
I agree.
Security's out of the question.
If the city's involved,
Right, okay.
yeah, I don't think.
I mean, because that can sound to the other problem, like I'm saying, is putting a lot on this enforcement issue and reporting on the average citizens, right? And it's not my job to constantly go around and report. So, you know, I know under you said that people drive around and report things, right?
I think
We
we
can't
can't
be everywhere,
like we discussed before, we all are moving forward to have each other's backs too.
Sure.
If I see something
Absolutely.
going on in his house or her house, I'm gonna call them.
Yeah.
And I would hope that they would return the same favor to me as well.
I think it just comes down to, educating the local residents that, we have this new system and also we have all the new signage and, educating our guests on what we expect for, their behavior and, the culture that we want to set here. And I think we need to allow this new software to do its job and collect some more data and see what the real problems are. I know we all know that there are things, but let's see, let's see what it brings and let's analyze it before we make any more.
Well, and like we talked
Ordinances.
about as well before, maybe something like this in their email, their welcome letter, unfortunately, they're gonna have lots of time to sit either coming through Corpus with the bridge being shut down or our lovely ferry to read and say, how can I be a nice neighbor while I'm in town?
Yeah.
So.
Everybody just putting in a better effort. As far as, I just got all my new signage made and I added something to it. I added vehicle max. And I made them specific for each property. And if it is a property that only has one parking spot and a spot for a cart, I didn't put two. I put 1 plus cart like that. I tried to do a little bit extra. And now, the neighbors will know and they could, let me know.
Now, of course, the next question I gotta ask, so how do you enforce that? That's
I tell them they
your,
have to take one to Sharpie. That's the only option.
okay, you're prepared to go that
Oh, yeah,
distance.
I am. I do
Because
that
otherwise
anyway.
it's-
I
the
mean-
word is not fast.
If I see crazy cars, taking up everything, all the spots in the street, we'll tell them this is too much.
That's great, I mean, I think that's the first step in finding that.
Yeah, we don't have a parking issue at our property, but we have had groups come with more people than they've reserved. And I think everybody said, if you just go talk to them, it can be resolved quickly. It's the people who are not going and talking to them, or the people that don't know there's too many people at their house. is
I
the
think
issue.
it's those, we know that there's a lot of people like you who are on top of it and pay attention, but we also know as an HOA manager, I know that there's a lot that are self-managed, they don't know what the heck is going on. There's
And that's why,
nobody to
that's
let
why
them
when
know.
we start
1,000 plus
collecting the
or more,
data, we'll
Yeah,
figure out who those
exactly.
people are. We'll be able to have some numbers to analyze. I mean,
Yeah.
I recommend we get together quarterly and evaluate the numbers that are gonna be coming in starting in January. And start making some decisions based on actual, hey, this is a hot part of town, this is a bad street, this is a bad house.
I think we
We'll
won't
be
really
able
know
to-
that until it gets busy again.
And one last, part of the big goal is to share that data, so everybody's aware. With, you know, what people are advertising with art, you know, with parking and all these things. So
I do think the city parking is an issue to talk
Yes.
about with park comp plan and figure out, is there an overnight lot we can create for violators of this policy and charge them?
Yeah, I mean, and we've got council members here, so that's the council decision and just the direction, you know. Manager. You know, I think there's some possibilities out there, and I would disagree. I've said before that I just challenge anybody from any of our guests that are coming here, from anywhere else that aren't used to paying a park.
Exactly.
You know, that don't, every corner they're on has a parking meter, parking suppression.
Every hotel you go to,
Just like
charges.
park on actually break that.
Yeah, I just had to pay like $40 for one night at a hotel in Dallas.
Staff will volunteer to moonlight Ballet Park.
Yeah. I did want to bring up too, at some point, so a lot of you met with Kathy Ritter from Better Destinations and the former Colorado Director of Tourism. And I talked to Tim a little bit about, the outcomes of this meeting and where we want to take that messaging, some of the samples you brought up, but some of the things we're going to want to do just immediately out of the gate, we can do some easy pieces like this, but is to do a little more research with visitor and resident sentiment and get some of that down into components where we can really develop a strong message and a campaign that builds out of that. So that's where we're kind of moving. That would all start as early as really the first week of December in terms of what we're looking at from our perspective, getting more stakeholder involvement, getting more resident feedback, and again, going back to the whole listening sessions, but also developing that message of what we want to tell visitors and how we want to tell ourselves to act.
And I appreciate you saying that, right? I think you guys are instrumental, the chamber is instrumental in helping if the goal and I believe it should be to change that paradigm, change the message to the. We've done a great job of getting them here. So now we just gotta do a great job of getting them here prepared to be the good neighbor. Bring your sunscreen, not your car, whatever the message is. But the chamber's gonna be instrumental in that message. And to turn it, and again, we're not gonna turn the ship on a dime. It's gonna be a slow steer. We didn't get into this overnight, I've said before. I don't think it's fair to think we're gonna get out of it overnight, but we've gotta start. That's the re-education. We have a lot of repeat customers. That's great. You guys have repeat customers. Great. What better group to have? But there's a training opportunity there. You've got the same people coming back. If they come back with one less car each time, by year 3, maybe we've got something manageable.
We are looking to, there's a couple of research components to it, but then also, I think it's Travel Foundation that has global connections to other countries, even doing some of the same things. The things we're running into aren't isolated, they're pretty common across the world and the globe, but really taking some of those best practices, applying them to Port Aransas in our own style, our own salty style, however we want to do it, but really coming up with that defined message and defined campaign that we can then also share with the visitors that we're inviting to come in and have the values that we
And the
want.
property managers that are, obviously, have their own means of promotion and their own PR advertising. So if there can be a unified message, even if it comes packaged a little bit differently, as long as the message is the same.
So what's your vision for these, I guess?
So, I mean, so what I
Place
did,
in each rental, are they given a ahead of time?
so what I did is I went and found a bunch of these. This is probably the best of the best I found. I found 20 that across the United States. These are probably the 7 better ones at least. They all have a similar style. Most information is fairly, generally the same, there's different variations on quiet hours and, other things like that. While I know our first go around to this policy, where we're gonna call it brochure, is not gonna be a final, but I think we need to get something moving.
So again, is it placed in each rental? So when visitors arrive?
So I think the,
I think multiple.
it's gonna be,
ways to
it's
get it,
gonna be on
so-
everyone's,
Yeah,
you
in
know,
their confirmation email, in the
the
property.
chamber will have it on their website, you guys will have it on your website, it'll be a printed version that might be in a motel room or hotel room or in a,
Condos.
well, I mean, I know, like with you guys, I know some owners don't want stuff in there. So it'll be a PDF version that's emailed to
I
them.
mean, I think even a signature, like we have community rules in a lot of places and they have to sign it and that's just one extra step of them having to help hold them accountable for it. So I mean, I even think we can send it out, it's very easy with software. You shoot out the community rules, you can shoot this out, they sign it, and then we have a file. And it just can't be this many words. It's too much. People aren't
It's
gonna
gotta
read it, they're not
be
gonna read
people
that.
on-
Short version with pictures.
Well, I mean, there's obviously gonna be a short version, but then I think there's a brochure version that's a little bit longer.
But I do think a signature is, yes.
No, I agree. with that.
Helps,
Yes.
helps with that, and it just, and then we just
Look at
file
the gals
it.
doing, kind of like that.
They actually have that model that we should explore a little more, where they have an ownership group.
Yeah, that's actually that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's where I think they pay. Yeah, that's that brochure that we had before, but they have a group where they all pitch in, I think it's $400 a year, and it's a pure voluntary situation. And you can be a self-renter, you can be part of a property management company, doesn't matter. But I think it was started by one of the property managers there. They have 400 owners involved in this, and this private security goes around to those particular homes. And I think they've hired out to police officers, county sheriffs and deputies and things like that. But I've reached out to, I think it was Riley or one of those companies down there that talked a lot about it, but they would be somebody to see if that's something that could be done here, where it was a group of property managers started the process, and then they brought in everybody that was renting, trying to get them to be a part of the process.
So every one of these appears to be a city-produced product. Is there,
So,
does it make sense to be a collaborative effort?
So-
Thank you.
so I talked with Brett briefly and he's, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's pretty much saying that they can cover the cost of doing a brochure. Is that correct?
Yes, a lot more than a brochure.
Well, okay, okay.
Cover the cost.
Cover the cost, I mean,
The entire campaign.
yeah, I mean, basically, they agree to cover the cost. Obviously, it needs to be a collaborative effort because we,
I'm more specifically talking about the message. The message, this looks like it's all developed city side.
a lot of them look like here, see, but I think we can come, why does it need to come from the city? Why can't?
No,
You know.
that's my point, is it, again, I think it should be a stakeholder driven, including the carrier of the big message, which is the chamber, but curious as to.
I mean, to me, I don't think, at this point, I don't think it should be strictly city driven. I think it should be, collaborative. Obviously, the chamber's gonna be able to put their logo and stuff on it because they're doing a lot of the work to get it done. But being that it's a chamber, it's gonna be a more softer approach than it's coming from the city. And it's like, this is it.
Well, like this one, good neighbor guy,
Right.
that looks nice, it's not. doesn't
And that's
scare
right. So I think if it's coming from the chamber, it's a little bit softer approach. And we can start with a softer approach, and if we need to move it in a couple of years where it needs it to be something that's done by the city to be a more hardline approach, I hope it doesn't go that far. I hope
I mean, do you think though, Tim, I don't think that's a hard line approach.
well, but
This one's a good one, though.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
actually really neat, like, I feel like a lot of people come here and they have no idea what the rules on the beach are.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
The
gonna free
only
up.
problem I see with these type of things, it's the same thing we deal with golf carts.
Yeah.
We get one person.
I know, I mean,
One person. And
But-
that one
This
person
is what we
doesn't,
hear about.
he goes, hey, let me tell y'all, before we get started on this vacation, that we've got to follow these rules. And that's the bad part about it. So,
Put a sticky with your rules on the cards.
yeah, you got to do.
On the, on the
It's
steering
on the
wheel.
steering wheel, we have all the rules.
That works.
Yeah, it does.
Or a hammer. every time they-
Sometimes.
Until they close.
But there's tools out there, and I think I mentioned it one time before, that, and I haven't signed up for it, because it's like anything else, it costs money. But the one idea where everybody in the house that wants to go on a Wi-Fi, they have to put their login. And once they're on there, they hit a splash page. That's the first thing, but just like when you go to a hotel, a lot of times you hit a splash page, and it comes up, and there's the 4 or 5 rules. And the first one to me is occupancy limits, because that slows down parking issues as much as anything. We get the occupancy, and I still be willing to bet you if you went to all the 2,400 property managers or properties that are being rented and asked the owners or who is responsible, what counts as occupancy, I think you're gonna see A to Z. And we don't have a message out there yet that says, they're breathing, they count. I don't know how you say it, but it's gotta be blunt.
How do you get that message out?
I
Well,
think
it's
you
on the
do.
registration form.
The person
Yeah.
It's out there. Everybody should know if they read the.
I mean, but I think part of it too is, at one point, we didn't count kids under a certain age, and I think there's that mentality that, oh, that's what it was X number of years ago. It's still that way in their mind, even though it's changed. So I think,
For the registration, when they fill that out, I'm sure we could have something there that says.
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, I mean, like I think Rick said, it's something that, it's taken years to get to this point. It's gonna probably take 2 or 3 years to get back to something that's more stable.
But the problem I have, Tim, I guess, is not, if we don't do this from a citywide point of view, then Steve brought up statistics. I mean, we're about 60%, is that right? Of people that are in management company. So if we don't have a city-driven number, and this is definitely from the city of Galveston, I would guess. I mean,
Well, the Galveston one looks like it's from the.
Association of Railmen.
That's the association they create.
If we don't do it that way, though, then what about the 60% of the people that aren't going to get one?
Well, I mean, so I
Yeah.
hate to say this, but
Right.
I don't believe you do it here, but, it's a requirement that everyone who registers a property, as part of the registration process is, you must have something agreed to promote or whatever this particular document.
Just as a placard, I mean, most of them
You have to
have
have a
like a
civic
plastic.
information sheet,
Right.
That could evolve, that could become something
Right.
better that we develop out of this.
Right.
And I don't think we've seen what the impacts of a lot of these changes are gonna have, because it's not been enforced. I mean, we just finished our tenant information sheet, and I've added a ton of information about pet policy for that property, where the fire extinguishers are in that property. All that stuff is there now. The location, in case you need to call, 911, all those things. Occupancy, and it stipulates, it doesn't say if they're breathing, they count, it says something else, but it does say that. And so it's gonna be interesting to see how people react to seeing that, because every time you walk out the door, which I think is a great idea, hotels that haven't done that for 100 years for no reason, they put it out there. So I think it's gonna be interesting to see how that impacts what we're doing today when we do that. And then having that information, outside the property says, this is who's responsible, and knowing that I can call on them anytime I want to, that kind of puts, if they don't know who you are, you kind of like, that doesn't matter to me.
And that's what a lot of these have, that, hey, your neighbors have an 800 number they can call.
Yeah. And I think that needs to be very prominent, that we have a tattletale system. Now, I don't know what you call it, but we're gonna tell on you.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
then when we get the data, we'll be able to review it, because right now, when we say 60% of the people are self-managing, and we think that might be part of the problem, we really don't know. We're
we
making
don't,
assumptions.
we don't know.
And we might find out that it's one single property management company that's not sitting at this table And every property they manage is horrible.
So you bring up a great
So-
point, 3 strikes and you're out. Who's that
Exactly.
applied to?
Should apply
Anybody
to
short-term
all,
Oh, who, the
The
owner?
property owner.
Property owner.
yeah.
What
That
about
privilege
management
is-
companies like he just brought up? Do you do anything? Hey, management company ABC constantly has issues and they don't resolve. They don't come up. They don't.
Three
take
strikes.
care of
They've
them
been,
in 60
they've been.
minutes.
100 strikes, you're out.
How are they written? What's the word on that?
They're the responsible
And
party.
again, it's whatever direction you send it, but the thought prior to was that the rental management companies can do everything perfect, that that property owner completely disregards it. It's their responsibility, Carla, here to say, you know, owning property,
That's
is
what I'm
privilege
asking.
and responsibility, and it doesn't matter who your management company is. At the end of the day, your property, you're responsible.
You're the one. that
You're the
decides.
one that we can go to regardless. They can fire the property managers, they can change them. But the property owner, is the
But
property
the
owner.
3 strikes applies to the owner, not
To the rental of the property, correct.
And so,
To their business, and
and
that's a big stick.
And
Let me
that's
ask you
why
this.
on the registration form, they sign that they've read the ordinances and they understand that they have to have a 24-hour contact.
so if a property owner hires a management company and the management company is lax in the management of the property, the owner then cannot change to a new management
Yes.
company and let them rent it out.
You just have to
But
make
it-
sure
But
we know.
still, the property owner is
But
gonna pay the price
So
for
what
the.
you're saying, if
the
they have
management
3 strikes,
Yeah, if I'm getting 3 strikes because the management company that I hired is doing a poor job of managing my property, I can then no longer rent my property out by hiring a new management company, or I would get 3 strikes
You would-
with
you
each
would be-
management
You would
company.
get the notice, you would get the citation.
you
Right.
would
So
know
you
about the
would
first
know
strike.
something
I think
happened
that
about the
second
second
one.
strike.
you'd
You're
be
like,
like,
hey, we moved it
"Oh,
quick."
yeah."
You're responsible to make sure you don't-
And then we could call Carla and say, hey, Carla, I've gotten 2 strikes with these guys. I'm not happy. As you're not happy, I want to move to a new manament company and reset my stripes.
I'm still lost on what the city can do though about management companies that are not fulfilling their responsibility.
And then there also has to be consistency with citations, which there
Yeah,
hasn't been,
that's-
so.
yeah, It's just so subjective. At the end, how do we measure that? How do we quantify if they're not doing their job? What if they're there in those?
We can do it very objectively on the owner, if the 3 strikes are out. Can we do it in a similar manner on management companies? You don't respond, I mean, because it really gets down to the management company, right, to respond within the 60 minutes. Yeah, it's the owner that's gonna be fine, but if you get a constant problem where a management company is not responding.
But it's a fine line we walk with contractors, Dave. I mean, if the contractor may deliver a work product that meets the code, that may be horrible. And the owner comes in and says, this is the worst contractor ever. Yeah, did you guys negotiate the price? Yes. But I think, you know, all those things are just difficult. So the management company can be out there in these people's faces all the time. And they don't get compliance. They can do everything right, but if they still don't get compliant, the property owners get called responsible. So we've just not taken that approach because it's just very difficult to
When you
we
say-
anecdotally hear, oh, these property managers are fake. Well, we don't have any concrete proof that that's the case. They could be doing it right and the renters or circumstances come about. So, like I said, the property owner though, if we suspend their ability to rent during peak summer months for 2 weeks, guess what? They're gonna be the most motivated to get the right property manager in line or make whatever adjustments they do to break their property into compliance.
So I know we've never done the 3 strikes on anyone yet. Is it 1, 2, 3, you're gone for a year?
It's discretionary, and it's suspended or revoked.
And where are the boundaries? Like, where does it set forth what a strike consists of? I mean, there has to be, you know, people need to know, the management companies need to know, okay, here's what's gonna happen in the event you don't respond in X amount of time. I mean, you can't just throw out there, if there's noise and you don't respond, well, what's that response time? And what does that look
I
like?
think it's a citation, I think it's a violation or, you know.
But we need to make sure we have that concrete somewhere where all the management companies understand.
It's in the ordinance, it specifies, so many violations within a certain time frame. I think within a year, Yeah.
Properties, they don't have, maybe one that falls short of anything. You don't want pretty much doing your job.
That's why that's why we don't fault the management company.
It's still
We have-
personal.
No, I know.
Yeah, it still comes down to that one, and I don't want the owner, I don't want to get that
Said
call.
there's only that one.
Yeah, I don't want to get that call from that one strike either. That's a personal,
But so at the end of the day, so you have an owner that you manage, and I guess you always have the ability to refuse service or refuse to take provider. But if they're advertising in their local paper and they're telling their friends not to quit.
we would be done with that, we're not.
But
gonna-
if you know,
Yeah, oh, if I know.
so again, those are the situations we know happen that we don't feel it's fair to strike the management company.
No, like I said last time.
Yeah,
Uh,
not
a-
issue.
Yeah, a lot of them respond, within the hour, the issue's resolved. It may be the same property the very next week, but it's different renters.
And here's what we're gonna find,
Yeah.
we're gonna start to see a pattern emerge, and my guess is the pattern could very well prove that the self-managed are the ones that have repeated violations, because there's not that level of that. But that will be concrete, quantifiable data that will, seeing logs, that we can go back and all of us look at and see. And that's what's gonna emerge, or one property management company could emerge.
Does that start January 1?
We're-
The data?
The registration, right now, our priority is to get the registration for the Lovely Boys so that we can get registered by January 1.
And so is everybody gonna re-register again?
Well, you have to anyway, January.
Okay.
It's an annual registration.
I almost hate to say this, but as a property manager, I almost feel if we fail to do our job, we don't answer that phone call, we deserve a fine.
I agree.
I mean, I 100% feel that, you know what?
It's a reputable, I feel that way. I mean, I know I did.
I don't think it's
surprising.
it's somewhat self-regulating because if you start getting a lot of different specific management companies having issues, then the word's gonna get out, people will go on it. Because if you start losing, your ability to rent, right?
Yeah.
Street service, you're out.
Sure. But I do agree that we should have some ownership in that. I mean,
Yeah, we don't go out the 24/7 contact number just because it looks great to
Yeah.
put down. I mean, it's probably one of the more fundamental parts of our whole short-term rental ordinance was just getting somebody to say, oh, man, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was going on, we'll get on it, we'll take care of it.
And we've had several homeowners register their property, they live in Pflugerville or wherever, and they put their local contact that has the same area code or
Yeah.
whatever, and we're like, can this person be here within an hour? Then they have to rethink it, let me see what I can do, and then most likely they come back with Silver Sands or Life in Paradise or something else there.
I do not accept the excuse that, well, I'm an hour away, I don't live in the town. That's completely falls on deaf ears as far as I'm concerned. You want to be in the business of short-term rental, manage your business, or don't be. We're pretty blatant.
I think God would be on his horse.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so.
it's on its knees.
Does anybody else have anything that they want to share?
So my recommendation is we pick a smaller subgroup to work with the chamber to develop the good neighbor policy, not this big group, because I think it's probably too big to really
Get anything done.
get anything done in a reasonable amount of time, because we want to try to get this moving forward. We need to have something out reasonably soon.
Right, and I think following up on that, so we do the small group to put out the one page or the starting initial pieces, but, have the intergroup want to come back first week of December, early January, as well as February, and then by the time we get to spring break, where the season rolls into fast pace, we have more of a toolkit we can provide to all of the stakeholders and residents and other folks that are more dynamic than just the brochure or the PDF, but have some legs.
So my recommendation is if you're interested in doing this, if we're Brett, He's one that's.
Are you chairing it from this committee's perspective?
Well, I mean,
The city perspective?
I will be a representative of, you know,
He's been voluntold.
yeah, I will be one of the representatives, you know, but I think we need at least one or two people from the STR slash, you know, self-managed. You know, so we need at least one from,
And then ask chief.
yeah, ask the chief to be on there, you know, so.
Yeah, but here's the thing, I would just ask everybody to contribute, I mean, look at this breaks up that you presented, if there's any others, I mean, obviously look around, and then just, the document's gonna coalesce into Port Aransas' version of this, or reality is, but if there's anything that's not in here or something, just add that in. I think that
That's
it'll
why I
probably
say,
be a
Tim,
pretty.
I wouldn't put too much into it. I think you mentioned at the very beginning, I'd rather just get something out quick that can be modified in either.
Well, I think it's gonna take
I
much.
don't either.
I really
Don't
don't.
want a framework, I think.
I think we meet one or two times and it's a done deal.
Yeah.
I mean, on the first go around and then, you know, it'll morph in a year to, you know, when we do reversion 2, let's say this time next year. Okay, we learned some things. We need to maybe reword this. We need to add this in, you know.
Oh, yeah, like my rental agreement went from like 1 page to like 5 pages over time.
Right, so I mean. you know,
Oh, I didn't think of that, I better add
Right,
it.
so it's one of those things, it's not gonna be perfect this first go around. It's probably- Yeah. Wow, you have to put that. But I mean, I think it's yes, we can have something that I think is very reasonable. And then it's not gonna be perfect. We all need to understand that. And then next year we come back and say, okay, this is what we wanna
Yeah.
add, take away, or change.
Well, it's a dynamic document.
Yeah.
It's gonna evolve, just, I don't wanna see any plagiarism, I don't wanna see our showing winners.
Yeah.
Don't be
I don't think- I don't know,
fairs.
but I don't think Brett's gonna have that. But,
And so for the other big thing we talked about was funding of police, right? Is that, can we check with Darla, Nicole, or Rick to find out how we would go about that?
Getting more funding.
I can tell you absolutely that becomes a 2022-23 goal for us.
Yeah.
I mean, the budget.
Fine, it gets on there, please.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's look for that, because we don't put it on there now. it'll be
Can we
25.
investigate to see what, can be allowed, what can be done
Yeah.
to generate additional revenue outside of HOT tax? I mean, our federal government does a really good job of figuring out how to spend money where it wasn't really supposed to be. So I would think our city government could help us figure out some of that too.
Some of the great areas.
There's got to be.
I think it has to come from the registration, from what.
Yeah, and that's what, that was the one group out of Georgia. That's what they did. They raised the registration fee to almost $500, and it varied on the size of the property because the revenue generated from each size of the property was different. I mean, that's not going to be very popular with homeowners for sure, but a lot of homeowners, obviously in Galveston, are willing to spend $400 extra to have their property protected. I would sense that our ownership group, a big percentage, would be interested in trying to protect their property more so.
And most of the homeowners love their community, they love Port Aransas and they want to help and,
You're
You
not
know-
gonna attract good renters and vacationers if the environment here
Amen.
is not conducive to bringing family down. So that's all there is to it. So it's beneficial for everybody to do it. And so who's putting the work product together on this, I guess? We've had all these workshops. What are we doing at the end here? We're gonna have a work product that comes out of this action item?
We just need, we need to get a couple, Jim and Audrey, just sit down with staff.
I know
Go
last
through
time,
what-
Tim, you brought up, we're gonna put an ordinance internalized, right? According to what. Jim
Yeah,
brought
it's
up.
on the.
Yeah, well,
So,
that and, we've got some trash stuff that I can take what we're proposing. If you wanna.
Sure.
we're good, we're fine.
So again, basically what we'll have, we're gonna present on the required trash. We'll modify the short-term rental ordinance. It's gonna be based on the number of legal sleeping rooms. We're saying bedrooms, sleeping rooms. 1 to 2 minimum of 1 toter, 3 to 5 bedrooms, minimum of 2 toters, 6 bedrooms and over, minimum of 3 toters. They'll automatically be delivered to each property short-term renting as close as feasible to March 1, based on the number of bedrooms mentioned above. Billing will be automatically adjusted. Each SPR owner or registered agent is required to cancel said toter service at the September date, otherwise the additional toters will remain in force. So the idea being is that it'll be from March 1 to September 8. So basically spring break.
So when we cancel in September, we automatically bring them back in March.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So,
And the reason for that, quite frankly,
Thank
is
you,
the
that makes my
Republic,
world go round.
Republic didn't want to do it for anything. It was just difficult to schedule drivers and coordinate the trucks
That's
for less than
fantastic.
7 months.
Well, so-
That's
so I
gonna
do
help
wanna-
so much.
So what I would want to mention is, so we originally talked about doing it just for the summer months. Republic said there is no way they can deliver 1,500 toters in May, then pick up 1,500 toters in September. Manpower, so they use outside service. They said their recommendation was to do it from March 1st through
I like
December.
it. That's
So, I mean, so we were trying to keep it as short as possible, but this is what we came up with.
Keep seeing this, keep on.
Right, yeah, so.
What a load.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, the only other thing that we have not
Fingers crossed.
figured out yet, there might be a small fee per,
I think we've
well,
told them no.
But-
We told them no. They're not gonna do a surcharge.
they're not, okay, so they agreed not,
That's not gonna appear on the
okay,
proposed recommended.
okay.
They're gonna benefit by the additional total
Okay.
and the revenue that they get anyway. So we told them no.
And then the noise ordinance is gonna allow the police to directly enforce it, right, Tim?
The way, well, I mean, Rick, you can read it.
Yeah, so we, Chief and Dave and I have all talked, and the concern we have is that this is what we want to be very careful, is that we don't eliminate the need for there to be a complaint. We don't want a noise vigilante that's not being agreed, not having his sensibilities disturbed, driving around and saying, I don't like that music.
Oh, that's where we are right now.
Because they, keep in mind, that will put our police force, which is very limited, 3 patrol officers on any given day, chasing around, potential to chase around.
I don't know if you understood, I mean, what
Well,
the chief said was.
No, I
He wants to be able to have his officers directly enforce the noise ordinance without a complaint.
Right, and we started to talk about it. That was the issue that came up and the concern that came up. So the whole
That one of
complaint
the
issue.
police officers would be a vigilante?
Yeah, that's what I want.
No,
No,
somebody
it
in
would be
town, like
anybody.
somebody on a Saturday night would just drive around and say.
They can do that right now.
Yeah, they can do that.
They have to be a complainant.
Would the
So it has-
chief,
It
They
has-
have to show up to their property and be able to measure it from there to see if. they're-
Somebody is being,
oh, because they have
Having
to
their
show up at the
sensibilities
site and meet the
disturbed.
cop there.
right, it's not somebody that's from Ingleside that's over here visiting, saying, that's too loud, that bothers me.
Yeah, it has to be somebody in there enjoying their home, whether it be their rental or their home. The police have to be able to measure the noise from that area.
So we're trying to look at what we've got and refine it, not to say that there's not some issues. And to make sure that the police have the right direction from the city manager. And- Because the city attorney and I have often talked, he said sometimes it's not necessarily about the prosecutorial win, it's about making the point. And so you're gonna split hairs, well, I don't know that we can prosecute it if this and that, sometimes it's about writing a citation. 95% of the time from the police chief's mouth, 95% of the time they get compliance right away.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the ordinance, but that's the problem with what we first thought, oh, well, as we looked at it, we thought, is that really what we want to have? Because if the police aren't gonna chase down every call they get, then there's no point in doing it, because anyway, so that's the dilemma. So we're looking at how to really fix somebody that's being legitimately aggrieved by.
But at the
excessive
same
noise.
time, we have to put in some way that a police officer driving down the road and here's a loud party going on, can take it upon himself to stop and say, hey, guys, you need to turn it
Absolutely,
down.
and I think they do.
Okay.
They said they can't right now.
No.
That's not true.
No,
If they can hear it from the street, they can.
Right, if they hear it, they can go say, hey, it's a little loud.
I'll have to tell, we
But
should.
again, it's-
Because that's not what he told me. He said the problem with the current ordinance is it requires third-party complaint.
That, therein lies.
But again,
the
I think it
strict-
comes back on us, like if Audrey had a guest in one of my houses, or next door to one of my properties, and our guests were being loud, I would
Yeah.
hope that she, like, they would call her and say, hey, these people are real loud, she'd call me and we'd take care of it. If city council members have never ridden out with our police force during the summertime, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you do to see what they do at nighttime.
And I,
Highly
and
recommend.
I think we're facing the
They
same
don't
thing.
have enough.
Yes, the chief says he couldn't prosecute that case. If he heard a loud noise, he went in there and said, oh, because the ordinance is written, it's gotta be a complaint. If the direction is that, look, if you guys hear really loud noises and you think it's too loud, go ask him to turn it down. That's simply a temperature of council in a direction to the police chief. But on the prosecution, the way the ordinance reads, yes, somebody has to complain, they've got to go to that property. So the question is, do we want to remove that and let anybody from anywhere have our police chasing down noises because they think it's too loud when they're not even the one that's being affected? And that's
The way I
that's-
wanted the ordinance written is simply so the police officer himself would not be the third party. So again, I don't want to drag this whole thing down, but we're obviously in the pit. So he's digging further.
But you know, those are the items that we've got to just.
And you're looking into it, trying to figure out.
Trying to figure out how to solve this problem without the dilemma that
Yeah,
I
because
shared.
already this gets down to what was what the purpose of the workshop, right? What were the big things that were bothering people? Noise, trash, parking, right? And so you know, those are the problems that people were having. So then parking, Rick, what we.
All right, so parking, again, when we get together to finalize and write up the product, we've talked about a lot of good things. We just need direction and because some of them were some pretty big changes. So the garages was discussed. I think it's a huge opportunity. We've never counted garages for required parking. There's a lot of properties that now either weren't in the past, but now are being short-term rented that aren't using garages. They're there. So is that something we want to look at? We talked about parking based on occupancy. That's a big departure from where we've been. So we just need good ideas for a problem that we've all identified. We just now need to know what these ideas, what you want us to try to, what you want us to put into place.
We still need the data from the software, from the complaints,
But
for the
you already
hotspot
said,
areas.
well, and you kind of ratified some of this thinking by
I'm trying to
you
do my part.
choosing to self-impose parking restrictions.
Well, I thought that was I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong here, when we left the last meeting, we agreed on 2 ordinance changes, the toters and sound.
Right,
Yep.
the rest of it.
Everything else was done, be on hold till we got data. Is that, I mean,
Yes.
I want to make sure we
Yes.
are on, that I
Yes,
understood that correctly. When I left that meeting, that's what I understood.
Yes, me too.
Okay.
And we're going to wait and let this new software, this new complaint thing do its job.
You know, and hopefully, you know, there'll be some.
Us all trying to,
help with the compliance issue.
And
see
property
where we're at.
managers who want to voluntarily put additional
Right.
restrictions to try to limit occupancy or
Because
parking at their properties. is
We
just
really don't
a
want to
good
write ordinances that absolutely have to. I mean, because it's a pain in the ass.
yeah,
I mean, it is, I mean, it is. I mean, why do we want to put more, I mean, but if you guys can take care of 90% of the problems, why write ordinances unless we absolutely have to? You know, as far as like STR related stuff.
especially
Like in the
big
last,
changes.
last meeting that I was here, if you figure out what your problem homes are, let's say you have a
Yeah.
home that
And
is
that's
just prone to having extra people.
And that's
I
what I'm
just
saying.
lowered their occupancy.
And that's why I'm saying we wait until we get data in.
Yeah.
And hopefully by this time next year, we'll gotten some pretty good data, hopefully, and we can, you know, say, okay, these are the problems. How do we reconvene and say, okay, is this an STR issue? Is this a code issue or an ordinance issue?
Is there any chance that we could explore the possibilities of looking for potential city-owned parking?
It's already being
That's-
discussed.
yeah.
It's already being discussed.
I just think that
It's on the list. It's just a matter of,
it's such a tough place for us to be in to say, where are we gonna send them, you know?
I mean, it's gonna have to, I mean, you know, I was in Tampa last Christmas. And they have all kinds of parking, but it's all like, you download an app, I mean, they're, you know,
Yeah.
it's easy. I mean, you pay by the hour, it reminds you, hey, you're coming up, or you pay by the day or whatever. But we're gonna, it's gonna be charged parking, because
Oh, yeah.
we can't.
It's not free.
It's not free, you know.
Well, that law could generate money to hire police,
Right, I mean, well, it's gonna have to generate money first pay.
Yeah.
but it should create.
Ultimately, down the road, yes, hopefully. I mean, yes, it's something we're looking at. How fast it's gonna happen, I can't say. I don't wanna say it's gonna happen by next summer, but, you know, it's something that we're definitely looking for.
And so when do you expect the data collection to start?
Like I said, the priority right now with just having hired this company, to get the portal up and going, registration, so we can people register first off.
I'm just
They'll
curious.
start to scrub the data and it will, like I said, we're just signing the contract.
Right, but the complaint hotline is gonna be up January first, right?
It should be.
Okay, so we'll start.
Yeah, that'll be dynamic too, and still be evolving and being refined, but.
But my guess is probably by, you know, April, or May.
First quarter?
We'll have some data, a little bit. I
About
mean,
the types of registration
Yeah.
we have.
But not
Right, end of
about
the summer,
violations.
Right, the end of the summer, we'll have
More.
more data
That's
about
right.
violations.
So that's what I'm saying, in September, we come back, we'll have probably some decent data, though, this will be perfect now. But it'll
That's gonna be a lot more than we have now.
Right, so we can say, okay, these are the hotspots, these are the issues that we, you know, we have 500 of this particular complaint, and they're all coming from this neighborhood, or from this condo complex, or whatever. We'll have some data to go with, then we can say, okay, hey, we need to concentrate on these areas with STR or, you know,
I'm thinking we would have a fair amount of data in 6 weeks after the start of collection, if the problem isn't bad, if there's gonna be so many calls to the
We don't
hotline.
have the tourists.
They're
It's not a
gonna be
time frame to gather the violation. We'll know, we'll have a better handle theoretically on the number of rentals, where the density is, where the concentrations are, how many are single family, how many.
Because really,
That they'll be doing pretty quickly, that's what they.
And just a question, as part of the education piece, are we driving people who have complaints to call the number on the house first and then the 1-800 number? Or are we driving them straight to the 1-800 number and let it disseminate from
I
that point?
love it. The 100 number.
Yeah,
So
that
we
they
can
can
log
track the data.
If they call the property management. company,
because it's
we
not
don't have
modeled.
it. I mean,
Right.
ideally, either one gets covered.
But how do
Right.
people get informed? The other company that we're looking at, the avenue, they would send out postcards out to all residents in the city saying that, hey, you have problems with short-term rentals, here's an 800. Is this company that we signed with going to use? So how do people actually know that there's an 800?
Put
You
it
put
in
that on
the-
the website, you put that out on social media, you get that out everywhere, they
So
see
let's
that
make
as
sure-
a
They'll find it.
flyer.
They'll find it.
I mean, that's my point. The goal is we have to do some things, we have to plan for it. We have to get 800 number, get it out on those different forms. to the community.
Have they, did any talk about how we put the STR registration number on the site? It just seems to me, knowing software, it's gonna be very tough to pick that stuff up. But if there was a straightforward way that the city says it must be located here, and it should say STR, number sign, pound sign, whatever you wanna call it, hashtag, and then the number, and then they can look for that hashtag or that pound sign within the software, and quickly scrub it and say, we have the information.
Most are listed as City of Port Aransas STR hashtag with the number.
Yeah, I see it. And we did look, and, you know, it's funny, there's also part of have a registration number. I don't know if it's good or not. But if
Well,
you,
that's what we'll find
if you
out.
go to Verbo and start looking, and I had one of my guys looking through there, and he found very, very few that did not have a registration of some sort. Which
We
is,
think we're gonna figure out
Yeah.
the registration,
I think so.
if they're legit. Therein lies the dilemma.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and problem with
comparing-
renewals, we don't change
Right,
the
right.
registration number, so
Right.
they could have registered in 2016 and never renewed after
Right.
that.
Or
Have that
probably
same
sold,
number in there.
yeah,
Unless
sold,
we look at
changed
that.
hands and the owner had stayed up, but
Yeah, so Tim, on occupancy, we're talking about a person to person, no matter how small, where are we going to put that?
That's gonna go in this,
Our messaging.
our messaging,
Is it a city ordinance though?
yes.
yes,
Yes.
it's part of the, it's part of the.
But right now, how is it written?
So I think we're gonna make sure that this WS, whenever they create that online registration, that somewhere it's info field. You know, you have to put in the number of occupants you can have. By the way, occupants is everybody from age 0 to.
And that's in our.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, it's already in there.
Sleeping room plus 4 if you're a smaller house.
Humans.
Plus,
Humans,
yeah.
a lot
That's
of
what we-
people.
No rush.
So we don't have to update that at all.
We did, we just did.
Yeah, we did that.
That was the
So,
most, or the second most recent. short term.
And then just, you know, for the property managers, we're just gonna continue to enforce what is on the books, and again, back to parking. Be very, very aware that any parking that's currently being, garages aside, that's not in the rules now. But any parking spaces that are there, are being displaced with picnic tables, barbecue pits, that we're gonna crack down on. That's gotta be available. We know that, you know, they would love to recreate in that space under the house, but it's intended for a car. And
So the restoration, it's gonna be plain that says this is a single family property versus, you know, a townhouse or condo, all that stuff. And then is it gonna say property managed by, and I know it has a different name, but is it gonna say by a property management company that manages more than one, or is it gonna say self-rental? How do you identify?
What are you asking?
So we're gonna be able to identify self-renting from property managers very easily without having to think through the process.
Yeah, because it'll say life in paradise.
It'll be the registration information, not just a feel.
And
You know,
they
this property
right
manager.
broken that down. So
Okay.
and if they said, hey, you got this many condos, townhouses, this many single families.
'Cause I'm still saying
Property management.
They might know how to do it better than us guys doing it all the time. But I think it's important to know for us as the Port Aransas, what we're dealing with as we try to add more rules and enforce things.
The registration look is gonna change a little bit to add those fields that we feel are important, so we can gather that
Golf
data.
carts, do you have a golf cart?
Right.
How many parking spaces do you have?
Because Carla's, I mean, Carla, whoever is assisting on the inspection, we're inspecting every renewal, so parking will be one of those ones. You see the barbecue pit or anything else, that's fix it. You know, in a parking space, so those are all the things that being able to lay eyes on these renewals help us with.
Okay, so are we going to meet again?
Yeah, so moving forward, I mean, it feels like the one big ordinance that we could tackle, we have, and that's moving forward, is the clear ordinance. Do we halt on this for a while and meet again in March, April?
I think we probably should meet before spring break. Just an informal, just kind of like, hey, what's come up in the past 5 months? Before we get into spring break,
End
and
of February?
yeah, end of February probably, probably before Working Training Festival, so that's gonna be busy for everyone. Sure. We just do an informal meeting, you know,
And by then we'll hopefully have some preliminary data, we can roll out and see how that's looking.
and then obviously we probably wouldn't meet again until the fall, because, we're all, unless we feel that we absolutely have to. I think,
I'd like to meet, like,
the small group that would meet, to the good neighbor.
Maybe you kind of handle that off.
Yeah,
Not a
yeah,
city.
not a city,
Not
yeah,
right.
this is something we need.
we want your participation toward the end of the first week of December, beginning of the second week of December, Kathy will be back in town. And I think we can even piggyback on some of the stuff we're doing on a broader scale to help her vet out the small piece. So you and I'll get together and bring that smaller committee.
So if you're interested in being part of this, I guess, good neighbor policy that we're gonna call it. Right, I mean, he's gonna set up the meetings, I think that'd be better than me trying to do it.
Yeah, and there'll be a lot of research went into it after the fact as well. So part of this, we do surveys for residents and then stakeholders, and a lot of stuff.
Okay. There's,
Who's gonna meet with you, Brett? Do you know? Or
Um,
somebody?
people are gonna email them and let them know if they wanna participate.
I'm the only one so far that's committed.
Yeah.
I mean, just feed I mean, like I said, the framework's quite clear. I mean,
Yeah.
take anything, look at it, find, if there's something that you need to Port Aransas that you don't see, send it in and just.
Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah,
No, I mean, and that's why,
I like to pick the grass.
Drive it on sidewalks.
Yeah, I mean, the picnic grass I love, I mean, that's one of those, I like, it's
You're
simple.
not allowed to drive on sidewalks? No.
Man.
Those are car chat, I bet.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I move to adjourn
All right,
this meeting,
Sound good?
November 9th at
What time is it? 4:20 to 4:21.
Oh, thank you, sir. How are you?